Hey guys, it's Matt, welcome to Speed Tutor, and today we're going to be looking at creating a basic little notification system so that we can walk into a trigger, and you can do this in any way you want, and it will show a notification, it will fade in, you can edit some text, you can edit the actual icon that it has, it'll fade out, we can control timers, and we'll do two different examples of how this will work. One example with a script which controls it all, which you'll have to add your UIs in, and you can do all your message customization from there. And this will disable after you exit or after a timer. Or in the third example, we'll use a scriptable object. So if you see on the previous two, we could, within the trigger event, we could edit the picture and the text and control when it should fade out or fade in. With a scriptable object, we can control this by having one script which just controls what UI is going to appear, and then the scriptable object which has all the information which we can duplicate lots and lots of times, which will hold the information of what we're going to do, say, and when we're going to fade, without having to fill in these trigger objects every time with separate information. We can do it all within the project panel. I'll also show you how to do the UI, I'll show you how to do a little bit of basic fading, and we'll write all the script today. So we're going to start off, all I've got is an FPS controller with nothing special on it. I've got three different triggers where we're going to place our scripts, which are just box colliders with set to is trigger, and we're going to be able to walk into them as long as our player has a tag of player. Now from here we want to create our UI that we want to create, so we want to right click, go UI, and choose a canvas. We're going to call this our notification canvas. And then we're going to right click on our notification canvas, choose UI again, and this time choose panel. Then once there, we can go into 2D mode, press F, and we've got our panel here, which we can use. What we can do is I'm just going to scale this down slightly to whatever size I want my notification to be. So I want it to look a little bit like this, and you can see my preview down here. And I'm just going to centralize this, as you can see along the top. I'm going to set the background to more of a dark, and then the opacity is already down, so you can click on the color and change the alpha channel of that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to call that my main panel for the actual notification that we're going to have. We're going to right click again, choose UI, and I'm just going to choose image. And this is going to be where the icon image will go. I'm going to put it in the top corner here and just hold shift and scale it out, and here my icon will go here. We can do maybe 230 by 230. I'm going to click on the anchor and anchor it to the top left, so it's always anchored to this object. We're going to call this our character icon UI because this is what we're going to change. And then we're going to right click on the panel, choose UI, and choose text. And this text is going to start at the very top corner. I'm going to pull this down, and again this can be aligned to the left hand side. So now I'm just going to call this the notification text UI, and then I'm going to change the text color to white. I'm going to set it to the middle, going to set the text to bold and just scale it up slightly and just write in some information here so that this is the notification text which is going to change. On our main panel we want to be able to fade this out like I showed you in the beginning. Now I want to add a component and just call this the canvas group, and what that allows us to do with the canvas group is it allows us to fade every single thing within the actual component that it has. So if I scale this down, you can see that from 1 to 0 I can go from 100% opacity to 0%, so we can look like we can fade it. To do that, we might want to create ourselves a little animation. So what we can do from there is I've just grabbed the animation. You can get that from Window, Animation, and Animation. What I'm going to do is make sure I've got this panel selected. I'm just going to say Create, and I'm going to put this inside my animations folder. I'll just call this Notification Fade In. And then what we're going to do is we're going to hit Record on here with that set to recording. We're going to set our alpha to 0. You'll see it creates a keyframe at the beginning, and scrub it across to 1 second, which is just along here. And then if we put the alpha to 1, we've got across 1 second, we've got the fade. So if I press space, you can see that it fades in across 1 second. Now I can press that button again to stop it recording. So we've got that animation. Now if we go to the animator tab, so Window, Animation, and Animator, and we go to the animator component, you can see that we can go to the state machine that we've got here. And I'm just going to hide this animation window now so we can see this. I'm going to just bunch this exit entry and any state together, you can see that my notification fade in is right there. We want to actually create a new state so this won't happen, or this one animation won't play automatically. So we can right click, create state, and we can just choose empty. So this can just be our empty state. We can right click and set that layer as default, so that layer doesn't do anything. So as soon as it starts, it won't do anything, it'll only when we tell it to do it. Now if we select on this notification fade in, we can copy that and press Ctrl V to paste back in, and we've made a copy of it. Now this can be what we can rename this to notification fade out, and we can set its speed to -1, so that will do exactly the opposite. So now we've got a fade in with a speed of 1 and then a fade out with a speed of -1, so it will actually fade out, fade in, just as we want. Now if we go back to our project panel, go to the tutorial folder and go to the actual notification fade in, we want to make sure that we take loop time off, because we don't want to loop this animation. We only want to call it when we want to do something with it. And we just need to start writing our script to make this happen. So what we can do is right click in the project panel, go create and choose C#. And we're just going to call this our notification trigger event. And I'm going to open that up in Visual Studio. So once we're here, we need to use some Unity UI namespace at the top, so Unity engine.ui with a semicolon, so that's what we're going to use to access some of the UI components. I'm going to add a little header to the top, which is going to just create some headings so we can see stuff a little bit better. I'm just going to write square brackets serialized field, because we're going to create a couple of variables to control the user interface, or the stuff that we're going to do on there. So private text notification text UI, and then another square bracket serialized field for private image character icon UI. We're going to now add some square bracket serialized field for the actual message customization. So we'll have private sprite and have this as your icon, or whatever you want the variable to be, so that your icon is something, the picture that you're going to set. So we're going to have square bracket serialized field, then square brackets again text area, because this allows us to do multi-line text rather than just one line in itself. Private string, and then notification message with a semicolon. Then we're going to have a few variables which are about to remove the notification. So we'll have a private bool, which is remove after exit. We'll set that equal to false. We'll have another square bracket serialized field, private bool disable after timer equals false. And then a square bracket serial field, bool disable timer, which equals 1.0f. And then the last thing that we need to do is to look at the animation, or to be able to reference the animation. So what we can do from here is again square brackets serialized field, private animator, and we can just call this our notification anim. And then we can also have a private box collider as object collider, because this allows us to just disable the collider if we ever run into it. So what we can start out by doing is doing a private void awake with 2 curly brackets below, and say that object collider is equal to the game object with a lowercase dot get component, and then in angled brackets we're going to say box collider with 2 brackets afterwards. Now we're going to have it when we enter our trigger what we're going to do. So we'll say private void on trigger enter, and in brackets if I double tab I'll say collider other. Then I'll say that if other dot compare tag in quotes in brackets player, so the player object that's going to walk into our trigger. Then we're going to start a coroutine that we're going to call enable notification with 2 brackets, and then end that semicolon, because we're going to declare a method just as we would normally. We're going to do a really similar thing for when we exit. So if we ever exit at one point, we'll do the if we are the player that exits, and the boolean remove after exit is true, then is just call a method called remove notification with 2 brackets and a semicolon, because this isn't a coroutine anymore. We don't need to wait any amount of time to do that. So what we're going to do down here is we're going to write our method for the enabling the notification, so i.e. numerator enable notification with 2 brackets, then 2 curly brackets below. Then we can say that our object collider dot enabled equals false. So as soon as we enable notification, we've disabled the object collider. So then we can still walk into the object, but it doesn't allow us to make the notification appear again. We'll have the notification anim.play, and we'll call the name of that animation that we created. And if we need to find that, we can go into our animations folder, which was our notification fade in. Go back into Visual Studio and add the notification fade in, add a semicolon at the end. We can say that our notification text UI.text is equal to our notification message, or whatever we're going to add to it. We'll say that our character icon UI.sprite is equal to the your icon, or whatever you're going to set it to. And then if disable after timer is true, then we'll say that yield return new wait for seconds, and then the disable timer, so how long we're going to wait before we disable it. Then we can call our method that we're going to have up here, which was remove notification. We'll just write that in again, and then we can quickly write our method for remove notification. So we could say void remove notification and say that notification anim.play, and then in this case it was our notification fade in, but we name that to notification fade out. Then we can add a semicolon at the end, and then we can say that our game object active is equal to false. But up here I just forgot to change this to on trigger exit to the exit one that we have. Go and click on our first trigger. You can add the script, and you can see that it's looking for the notification text UI. We could just click the little plus and we'll say notification text UI, which is the one on this side. Then if we're looking for the image, which is going to be our character image UI, which is also there. And now we can look for a sprite. So I've just created a few icons, and I've just got one for a male, and then my notification is going to be please help me. And then we can say that we can remove after we exit, and we can remove after a certain amount of time if we didn't exit. And then we'll need the animation notification itself, so we can just add the main panel in here. So what we need to make sure is our main panel, make sure that its alpha by default is 0. Then we can press play. Then when we're here, we expect when we run into this, we get our notification of please help with the icon. It'll fade out after a certain amount of time, or if we exit the actual trigger itself. And that's this part for that simple bit of logic. Now, I said that if we wanted to, rather than having to add it to this and customize this specific trigger, we could have just one trigger which is universal across the board and have scriptable objects which we can change within the actual game itself. So if we want to create a scriptable object, what we'll do is we'll right click, choose C#, and we'll choose this can be our notification scriptable. And what I'm going to do is open that up in Visual Studio in the class. And I'm going to change this to public class notification scriptable. And instead of it being inheriting from mono behavior, we're just going to make this a scriptable object. So a scriptable object just holds information that we're going to give it. So what we can do is actually copy all of our variables into here. So we'll just copy the message customization for your icon and all the booleans and examples and just paste them in here. So we just have exactly the same. Remember in your scriptable object to make everything as public so it's accessible elsewhere or outside of this actual class. So I'm just going to make it all public, but we need to be able to create our scriptable object. So above the class, we need to be able to make sure that in square brackets, we'll write create asset menu, and then open the bracket here, we'll say that the file name equals, and then we're just going to call this our notification SC. This is just because I've already got one named, and end the brackets. As long as it's in square brackets, we'll be able to create this. Now I'll show you how that works. We'll go back into Unity again. I'll go to my scriptable objects. I'm just going to add that script to my scriptable objects folder. Now I'm going to right click my scriptable objects, go create, and you can see that I've got notification scriptable because that was the name of our actual script that we created. So if we select that, you can see that the name by default comes out at notification SC. We can just have this as we can name this female hero objective as an example, and you can see that we get all the same components. We can add different icons, and we can say that I am the notification. We can choose if we want to exit, what the timer is, and of course we can duplicate this as many times as we want, and we can control all the different settings in our scriptable objects just in the project panel without having to find these objects in the hierarchy and edit them there, because it can get a little bit messy. So now we actually need a script to be able to control how we're going to use a scriptable object. Or that's much simpler than we had. So we can right click, we can choose C# and call this our notification trigger scriptable. So we'll open up in Visual Studio, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the entirety of the previous script that we created, which had everything already for the actual trigger event. And I'm just going to paste that in, and we're going to get rid of a few things because we don't need it, because our actual scriptable object controls most of it. So we don't need any of the settings for the message customization. We still do need the using Unity engine.ui at the top, and we still need all the customizations for the animation and everything else that we need. But in this case, what we want is a reference to our scriptable object. So we can write square brackets serialized field private notification scriptable as a reference to our notification that we're going to create, and just have this as note scriptable or whatever name we want to give it. And now what we can do is that on trigger enter, we can enable the notification like before. On trigger exit, we can, instead it's looking for the remove after exit. Now that doesn't exist in this script, but we need to access that from the note scriptable object, so we can reference that. And then if we look at the notification, we need to do the same thing. So we can copy the note scriptable, so the actual variable we created, and we'll say dot notification message and then dot your icon. Then we could do the same for whether the disable timer is clicked or not, so we can do notification scriptable and do the same below. And we can just use all the same logic that we had before, but without the need for all the references at the top. So now what we can do is we can go back into Unity, go to our object, and we can just add the notification trigger scriptables. Now we've got a way to add the character icon, which is here, and then the notification text, which is here. Then we need the scriptable object that we're looking for. So we can press the little find, and we can use the hero objective, which of course we could edit if we wanted to, and then it will look for the animation that we had before. So in this case, we could duplicate this lots and lots and lots of times, and all we need to do, we can keep everything the same, and we can just add our different scriptable objects if we had different ones for different heroes that we might wanted to use. So as you can see, it'll work in exactly the same way. So you can enter, and then you can exit after a certain amount of time. It will remove our object, and then we can get our notifications fading in and fading out. So I hope this helped everybody out, and you like the look of this tutorial, you can get access to it on my Patreon. So be sure to come and check out my Patreon and get access to over 115 different scripts and projects that you can't find anywhere else. Be sure to come and check out my great assets on the Unity store. Come and join me on Discord if you want to chat, and thank you to everybody who supports me on Patreon, along with all my subscribers and everybody who subscribes along the way. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Cheers.